This thing's working. Just putting a harness on. For those that are here, can you let me know if you hear me?
Yeah, I can see you.
Nice, cool. We'll just wait a bit for other people to sign in. All right, and maybe when you sign in, just use a chat, say your name, say where you're from, uh, potentially say like what kind of goals you have within climbing or just outdoor recreation in general. Something like that, some kind of intro. Just say that in the chat. Um, I'll put that in as well while we're waiting for people to sign in. Cool. Hey, y'all. I mentioned when some people were on, but just post in the chat what your name is, where you're from, what your goals are for tonight, and then maybe what some of your goals are in outdoor uh, endeavors in general. So what you're trying to do, maybe a cool goal you have. If you're trying to do Aconcagua or something, or if you're trying to summit Baker, maybe you're just trying to hike more. Any kind of goals like that are totally fine. Nice. And hopefully, if you guys have the opportunity to have a harness on, have a rope out, have some climbing gear accessible throughout this, that would be great. If you do, certainly turn video on if you want. You're welcome to show off your setup and walk through some of this stuff with me. It will certainly be beneficial to to tie these knots and do these things while I'm talking about it. But that all being said, this is also recorded and it gets posted on the website after the fact. So if I go too quick at all, you can certainly just watch it again and pause it as needed and do that kind of thing. But yeah, so for those just entering, we're just giving it a couple minutes for people to log in. But if you could post in the chat what your name is, where you're from, what some of your goals are for this specific, for this monthly meeting tonight, but also what your goals are in general. If it's mountaineering, if it's rock climbing, if it's anything like that, yeah, just post that kind of stuff in the chat. I would love to see what people's goals are and what their aspirations are. But yeah, we're just giving people some time. Hey, Goody.
Hello.
Hey there. We're just giving people some time. Goody, you might have also just missed it, but post in the chat what your name is, where you're from, what your goals are for this immediate meeting, but also just in general. Cool. So yeah, y'all can keep posting in the chat. You can, if you have any questions throughout this, please post in there. It's sometimes a little bit easier than chiming in if we're going through a specific process. If you just add it into the chat, I'll hopefully be able to address it throughout this meeting. But to get started, my name is Brian. I'm owner of Access the Alpine. I work in Salt Lake City, Utah. I work in Moab, Utah, where I am currently. And then Access the Alpine is actually based out of Bellingham, Washington. And that's where I work for the majority of the summer. But I kind of travel around those three places. And that is that I've been guiding since 2012, 2013-ish. And pretty much like started guiding when I turned 18, and I'm about to turn 30 soon. So been guiding for a long while. I just finished, I'm a certified rock guide through the American Mountain Guide Association. And within that whole process, you do what's called a rock rescue drill. And it is very specific to, I would say, a professional guiding setting. But it has a lot of information that can be particularly useful in recreation as well. If anything were to happen in your recreating, having those sort of skills is certainly beneficial. Today we'll talk about, I'll use the rock rescue drill sort of as a base foundation of what we can talk about, but hopefully I'll interweave it with more of a recreational side. So it'll sort of be a mix of both the rock rescue drill and how that thing works, as well as how that's actually applicable for your own climbing. Because some aspects, like in the drill, you have two clients, and oftentimes you're not out recreating with three people all the time. You're not always in parties of three. Sometimes you are, and those skills are certainly specific to that. But it's also nice to be able to do that in just a party of two. So we'll talk about that a bit. We'll talk about like lowering your climber, hauling your climber. We'll talk about load transfers and how that kind of stuff works. And we'll get into all of that this afternoon. Before I jump into it, I guess, yeah, some last little housekeeping things. Again, this is through Access the Alpine, my company in Bellingham. I do this every month, so you guys are welcome to come every month. It's a free monthly Mountain Monday. We do it on Mondays. It's always at 5 p.m. Pacific time, which throws everyone off. And I think my booking system sometimes sends the wrong time, but it's always at 5 p.m. Pacific time. And yeah, we do a different topic every month. So if you have opinions of what you want to get better at or what you want to work on, please add that to the chat. I love feedback on things we can talk about every month. And I'm personally obsessed with like the rock rescue drill through the AMGA, but also just rock rescue and technical rope systems in general. So that I was the impetus of this topic, but certainly other topics have been from other people. I didn't invent all of these things. Let's jump into it. Again, to reiterate, please use the chat if you have any questions or if I lose you. This whole thing will be recorded and reposted later, so you can rewind it and relive this experience as many times as you want. Yeah, Rick just mentioned that. Check it out on YouTube. I post all the old ones on there too, so you can check those out. So let's talk about rescue. So if you're in the need of a rock rescue, that means something went wrong. So something happened. So maybe in this context, we're also to be clear, we're going to talk mainly about belaying from the top. So let's say you're on a multi-pitch. You have just climbed your pitch, and then the person following you, like maybe you had too much slack in the rope and they fell, they twisted their ankle or broke their ankle and they need to go down. Or maybe you are in an area where you can't just go down. There's an area here in Moab called Mill Creek, and it's all top access. So you start at the top. So you start with the anchors right here, and then you lower your climber down into the canyon. They climb out, and that's how that works. So if anything were to happen in that context, you would have to bring them up with you. Nice, John, rock eye track. That's sweet. I'm gonna pull up the PDF that I sent everyone. Hopefully everyone got it. It's just the rock rescue drill through the AMGA. And so, yeah, those are some of the assumptions there. You're at the top doing this drill. For the AMJ, for this rock rescue drill specifically, let's see. This is the PDF. So this is the assignment. Essentially, if you have to go through your advanced rock guide course, you have to do all of this stuff within 50 minutes. You have to do all this stuff within 50 minutes, and you only get a select amount of equipment. So the equipment allowed is over here on the left. The scenario is over here on the right. Guides belaying 2 clients directly off the anchor. Again, this is all top managed. You have to lower the climber with a knot pass. One of the climbers, you have to remove the injured climber's rope from the belay plate that you're using. You have to raise the injured climber a meter using a 3-to-1. You have to then raise them using a 5-to-1 or a 6-to-1. You have to rappel to the injured climber, ascend back to the original anchor, counterbalance rappel basically on the opposite side of the rope to get to them. Then you go to an intermediate anchor, and then you rappel to the ground with them. So here is the flow chart of the 2 things. Again, I sent this in that email with this link. So anyone on this chat has that email, and it's just attached at the bottom. Feel free to look at that and reference it while we're doing it. I'll talk about a lot of these things, and I certainly won't cover everything, unfortunately. We only have an hour and a half with each other, and I've spent days and days of my life perfecting this, so I can't cover everything, but I'll try and cover a lot. That's what that looks like. Feel free to bring it up. And like I said, sort of before we started this, feel free to work on all of these knots and things while I'm doing it. So let's start with building our anchor. So our choice of anchor will really affect how well this goes. Specifically, if you're trying to do this for the AMGA, I highly recommend you make a quad anchor. Quad being it's clipping like so. Tie knot on this side. That's what we're going to use for today. And I'll talk about the benefits of it. So here and here we have our limiter knots, and then we clip it back up here. So the huge benefit of if you're doing the drill for this, and the huge benefit of if you have to perform a rescue, if you have a quad anchor, this has 2 separate master points that are independent from each other, but additionally, they're V-shaped, which is actually really key for any sort of rescue scenario. If you were to build a PowerPoint anchor that's just an overhand, that's just going to be a loop of rope. And what happens when you have multiple carabiners in that one loop is they bind together and they pinch on each other. So if you try and remove this and this carabiner is loaded, then this one's really hard to access. So there's a huge benefit to using a quad. That's why we'll start with this. So we'll start with a quad because that's the easiest. I highly recommend if you're doing this for your advanced course, an aspirant exam, try it with all different configurations of an anchor. That way, if you do get stuck with a not quad anchor, you're not totally screwed. So let's start by being tied in. Things I could have done before this. Uncoil this rope. So we'll start by being tied in. I always tie in on a clove or tie in on a figure eight and then attach the anchor with the clove hitch. That's a good starting place for anything like this. Tie in. Grab a carabiner. And we'll attach using the clove. So I'm here. I'm attached to my anchor. And now I'm belaying my partner up. This is where I'll talk about the main benefit of if you were to belay your partner up, if it's just two people and you belay them up with a gree-gree, there's a large benefit to that because a gree-gree, you can belay someone up, they get to the top, and then you can immediately lower them down if you want. You can belay them up halfway up a pitch, and if they get injured and need to go to the ground, you can immediately lower them, right? That you don't have that same advantage belaying from the top with a plaquette device that's attached to the anchor, right? You can't just immediately go to a lower after that. For this drill, you don't have a gree-gree on the item list, so you have to use a plaquette device. We'll use a plaquette device, and we'll just start by having one person attached to it, and we'll talk about how that works. So I have my plaquette here. A plaquette is just an ATC or a tube style device. I pull my rope till I get to my client or my guest or my partner, whatever. Feed that through the ATC. You're now in top belaying mode, like so. So let's say my climber's coming up and yeah, they take a fall. Not all of the rope was pulled out. The rope stretches a bit. They hit a ledge. They break their ankle. They're mentally fine. They're totally good to go. Let's just get them to the ground. The best way to do this, and what you'll use in this drill a lot, is what we call baseline. You'll want to get your partner into baseline. Baseline is a Munter mule overhand. Maybe chime in the chat if you know MMO or if you don't know an MMO, because I am curious what people's experience is within this group. And yeah, if people are going to be totally overwhelmed with this, hopefully not. Yeah, MMO, sweet. Know it. All right, great. Don't know it. So people that don't know it, look it up right now. I'll talk about it as well. So you're not just totally in the dark. But yeah, MMOs are a great thing to be familiar with. I tie them all the time here in Moab because we actually use that a lot for canyoneering guiding. You tie MMOs that way. It's essentially a releasable hitch. And it starts with a munter. So without getting lost in our scenario. So our scenario is our climber fell right here. I'm now trying to do a load transfer to get the weight off of this and then get it onto a munter. A munter is a type of hitch where I can just lower my climber down to the ground. The benefit of it is you can flip it so they can climb up. They can also be lowered down. One option, I mean, if it's just you and one person, you don't have to belay them up with this ATC. You could just belay them up with a munter hitch and then lower them back down to the ground. A munter hitch, actually, I was deeply thinking about a munter hitch the other day, and it's the only belay device type of thing that we have that you can operate remotely, which is kind of fun. So a munter hitch, like once you tie it, you can be distant from it and transition from belaying someone up to then lowering them down. And no other belay device or belay thing, I guess a munter isn't really a belay device. No other thing can really do that. So anyway, let's let's rewind for clarity. I'm just gonna start with a munter, just because some people aren't totally familiar with an MMO. And then I'll just show you what baseline is. So here, let's say I'm belaying this person up. This is a munter hitch. You can look that up on the internet. I don't need to teach you. You can also, like I said, rewind this in the future and relearn it. So munter hitch, I'm belaying this person up. Let's say they take a fall. That munter will likely roll over. What a munter mule overhand is I'm going to tie a mule knot, which is you make a loop, essentially a slip hitch. And you do that around the load strand. And then you tie an overhand around that whole thing. And it looks like that's a very shaky anchor. So this is what a munter mule overhand looks like when it's all said and done. It looks messy once you get the hang of it. This is essential for most, if not all, rock rescue scenarios. It's also nice for belayed rappels. That's what I was talking about us doing a lot in Moab. Some tricks to it is having this slip hitch be nice and close to your munter, having this overhand be nice and close to your half hitch or slip hitch or whatever it's called. That way it doesn't all compress when this is loaded. Okay, that's an MMO. Hopefully I didn't totally lose everyone there. Now that you've seen that, being familiar with tying it on a rope is great. That's super important for getting to baseline. Again, baseline is just putting your climber on that MMO because you can transition a bunch of different ways from that. So you can decide to lower them. You can decide to haul them up to you. You can decide to do a whole bunch of different things. But the first step is getting to that munter mule overhand. So the way we're going to do this when we're using an ATC is by actually using a cordelette. So again, here's my climber. They're on belay. They just took a fall. We're going back to our little scenario. I'm going to grab a cordelette and I'm going to tie a climb heist. Hopefully people know what a climb heist is. That I'm certainly not going to talk about right now. But essentially, I'm just wrapping this around a bunch of times. If you're doing this rock rescue drill for your advanced rock guide course, please, please, please practice this and make sure you know your material really well. Often what happens is people don't tie enough wraps on their climb heist and then they sandbag themselves because it doesn't grip, or maybe they just get new material right before the Alpine guide course. That happened to someone on mine. And yeah, it didn't engage. So I'm going to try and demonstrate this weighted. So this is weighted, this strand. I tie my climb heist here, like holding it down with my toe. Okay. There. I tie my climb heist here. And then what I'm going to do is tie another munter mule overhand. But instead of tying it with a rope this time, I'm going to tie it with this cordelette. So what I'm going to do is attach it here. I'm going to keep my climb heist nice and close. I'm going to tie my munter like so. Make sure it's nice and tight. I then tie my mule. And then one trick for if you're tying this with a cord is instead of tying an overhand, you can feed this tail through, and that closes that system. Because if this were to pull through, this strand just goes, this strand stops it. Then always lock your carabiner. Okay, at this point, I'm going to push this climb heist down so that it actually grabs my weight that I'm trying to, not my weight, but my climber's weight down there. It's going to be tough to fully transfer the load onto this hitch. What you'll often do for clarity, I'm going to move this clove hitch just over here, so it's out of the way. There we go. What you'll often do to transfer the load is you'll just rock this back and forth. That way, there'll become slack in this strand. Now, if we were to do that right now, if I were to just take out all the rope and undo this device, then my climber would just be hanging on this one friction hitch. That's generally avoidable, and you kind of don't want to do that. So to avoid that, I'm going to preemptively tie my baseline, which is what we talked about earlier. So I'm going to clip this carabiner here. I'm going to grab the back side of my ATC. I'm going to tie a munter hitch and attach it here. I want to make sure that when I tie this, I'm tying it in the loaded position. If you've used a munter, you know they roll over each other. So it goes like this and like this. You want to make sure that when you tie it, we're going to eventually transfer the load onto this. We want to make sure it's in that loaded configuration. That way it doesn't roll accidentally, because you'll lose a lot of progress. And that's where people lose a lot of time in the rock rescue drill or in like a real rescue. So I tie my munter. I tie my mule. Again, MMOs are key for any sort of rescue scenario. I then have my overhand. And it looks messy. Let's talk about what it is. Hopefully people can see. ATC, this is what I was belaying my person up to begin with. This is my baseline. This is the back of the back of the ATC goes to my baseline. This is just an MMO, munter mule overhand. And then this cord, unfortunately, it's all green, so it might look like a blob. This cord is also an MMO up here with a climb heist at the bottom. And this is what we're using to transfer that load to our baseline. So let's get into it. So I have this here. I have my definitive backup, this munter mule overhand, behind my ATC. So now when I rock this back and forth, my climber's weight is here. I rock this back and forth. I then have slack here. But now they're hanging just on this friction hitch, but they are fully in the system. If I were to take this ATC out because of this MMO. So I'm going to undo this ATC at this point, like so. And you can see that this climb heist is taking the weight, right? This is loaded. This is not. But this is the definitive backup. I can take this ATC off. And now essentially all I need to do to transfer this weight is undo the cord, munter mule overhand. I'll pop that. And I'll lower this out. One error people often make is not having this climb heist high enough to begin with. So when you do lower it out, it ends up being like by their toes or inaccessible to reach. You want it to end like mine ended about 1.5 feet below. You want it to end pretty close to you. That way it's not ever going to be out of reach. I can then undo this, simplify the whole system, take this climb heist out, take this carabiner off, and you're good to go. Often, if you're doing the rock rescue drill, what I did in mine is you just take this cord, instead of coiling it up, you know you're going to use it later, you just toss it in your sun hoodie. Just make sure the bottom of your sun hoodie is under your harness. Okay, so now I'm set up here on this baseline. What does this get us? This makes it so that I can actually lower my climber down to the ground. Right, before I was belaying with an ATC, I could disactivate that ATC, and that's super great if you know those techniques. Often they're a little bit complex and not always the smoothest. If you're trying to lower someone for a decent amount of time, you'll probably want to just transition them onto a munter. Now that it's a munter, because I'm lowering them, I'm fully relying on this munter hitch. I'm gonna add a third hand backup, and that is expected if you do your uh, exam. So I'm gonna add this third hand backup. I just use an auto block, so I just wrap it around a few times. Make sure that engages, that does. At this point, I'm gonna just lower them to the ground. Okay, and I'll add a little bit of fun to it as well. We'll add a little knot pass here eventually. But one thing, I'm about to release this muncher. One thing you don't need to do in your advanced course, like during the exam, is you don't need to pull up all this rope on your friction hitch. You want to make sure it works, right? But I'm going to pull all this rope out. I'm going to pop that muncher, and then I'm going to lower them down, and I'm going to get to this friction hitch anyway. So don't waste time like readjusting that every 2 feet. So now I'm lowering them on a munter, eventually get to my friction hitch. I just keep bringing that down. On the drill and potentially in real life, if you're lowering someone, there could be the potential for rope damage while you're lowering them. And this isn't like, oh yeah, I just transferred this load and now there's it often isn't going to happen all at once like this, but this drill is a very good example of if you can do all of these skills in this set like order, then if you need to do any of them individually, then you're pretty well off. You're going to do fine. So that was a load transfer to baseline and then baseline just to lowering. We'll talk about a knot pass now. So let's say I have a piece of rope damage here. I wish I had a piece of tape or something. But we'll say I have rope damage here. Maybe I see a core shot. It's just white and I'm concerned about this. What I can do is I'll just tie any kind of bite knot to seclude that. Do an overhand. You can do a butterfly. If you're doing your advanced course, they often just tie it like randomly somewhere. And sometimes they have tape, but either way, this is the knot that I'm going to want to pass. So I'm lowering my person to the ground. And maybe they got injured from rock fall or something like that. They got injured from rock fall, and while the rock was falling, it also smashed into this rope and core shot it. All right, that's the hypothetical situation that's happening. So how am I going to deal with this? I've secluded it, right? I put it on its own little strand so that when this is loaded, it's not actually waiting the cut part. But now I want to move past it. I want this to go through my munter, or I want to go past this somehow. The easiest way is if your climber can unweight the system. But let's do it actually, because it's good to see. So if your climber can unweight the system, this knot here, if you just clip it in, that's a pretty definitive backup for your munter hitch. And so maybe I'll clip that in. I'll keep holding this brake strand. I'll undo my prusik. And what I'll do is I'll bump it below this knot. Like this. It's technically, if they can stand, you don't even need to back this up with this. Right, and they're standing up. I can just say, hey, stand up for a second. Or like start climbing or just down climb for me for a second. And what I'll do is I'll just feed this through and I'll feed this whole munter or this whole knot through my munter hitch. So I'm lowering this. I'm just feeding it through. They're down climbing a little bit for me. Maybe they're down climbing what they just climbed up. Right. And then I get this around. You want to be cognizant not to put your fingers in weird spots if they like were to fall. Oh, fair point. Fair point. Not acceptable because there's a core shot in it. That's a very fair point. Yeah, maybe yeah, exactly. Add another bite. Yeah, totally. Yeah, that was a mistake on my part. This bite would not be acceptable in clip to correct what I just said. Um, anyway, then you just feed that through. You're good to go. Then you just keep lowering them, and you're set. In that scenario, yeah, the question was, why would that backup be acceptable? It would not be acceptable. So, what actually you could do is because they're down climbing, this would just be acting as a backup. So you really don't even need to like close the system while that's happening. You don't need a backup because you are the backup to them climbing, if that makes sense. Hopefully that answers that question. Yeah, do not clip this like I just demoed. Thank you for that, catch. Let's do a loaded not pass now. This is what you would have to do as a part of your advanced rock course. It is a weighted not pass. It is not an unweighted not pass. It would be great if it was an unweighted not pass. It would be much easier, but unfortunately it is not. So the key is stopping your knot before it gets to here. Certainly, like when practicing it, that's what's gonna totally sandbag you is if it gets too close and you don't have like enough space. So just going slow when you're getting close to this knot and taking your time right there, taking a breath, that's gonna save you a lot of headache in the future. My first step of this knot pass is I'm gonna make my definitive system first. So I have a locker. I'm going to make again my MMO. I make my munter. I'm making this on the back side of this munter. Just might look weird because of the angle. And then mule. And I then overhand, making it nice, clean. And I pull it tight. Okay, now I have my definitive setup here, right? At this point, I need to do a load transfer. And what we learned just previously, our paint sent out now. Nice. To do a load transfer, we need to grab the load using something. I can't just release this and hope this knot is going to go through this munter. So this is where you reach into your sun hoodie and you grab your cord that you just put away. And you do the same steps. So you add your climb heist. Like so. One good trick too, I didn't demo it in the last one. If you're doing this for an exam, what can often save you a lot of time if you screw up is if you tie a overhand knot here, like that. It's very like minimal time adding to create that. But what it does in the future is it gives you a shelf if you need to like block and tackle your way out of something. Hopefully I don't need to use it, but adding that knot can potentially save you a lot of time. So that's a good trick. Okay, I need a carabiner. Oh, here's one. Another trick too, if you do end up without a quad and you end up with a like a overhand master point or something like that, something that doesn't have a V-shaped master point, to consolidate space, what you can do is instead of clipping your climb heist carabiner into the anchor as well, which can potentially pinch your carabiners together, what you can do is you can clip it to the carabiner that you're transferring the load to. So in this case, I made this baseline here. I can clip this here and build off of that here. That way, once I release this whole thing, I'm only using one carabiner's worth of space, so it doesn't like bash into it itself. For this, I'm just going to use the quad because it's sweet. So I'll add a munter. first I'll bring this up, then I'll add my munter, mule, and then I'll just pull it through. I'll lock this. At this point, this is why you want a little bit of space here in between your core shot and your munter hitch. At this point, I'm gonna feed this munter out and try to weight this with my toes, but I'm essentially now weighting this climb heist. Right, so this munter that was before my knot is not weighted. I can then undo it. I can undo my third hand because it doesn't do anything right now. And now I have my definitive system I set up first here. I have this extra carabiner. And I have the weight of the person, which is captured on this climb heist. And the core shot I'm trying to pass is right here. Okay. Now I just keep rinsing and repeating. I add my third hand because I'm going to a munter hitch. Clip it to myself. I lock that carabiner. Cool trick with this one. If I were to release this right now, then this climb heist would be really, really far down. If instead I undo this one first, what I can do is bring this up so that the knot is super close to this carabiner. Like I could literally have it just next to this pear-shaped carabiner, like so. That way I'm holding this. I have my backup down here. For clarity, I'll bring it up. But again, on your exam, you don't need to do that. I have it up nice and high. At this point, while controlling this brake strand, I can undo this, pop that, and then lower. I wish I had weight. Lower my climber onto this rope, which now has the core shot secluded on it. I'm back to another munter hitch. And I can lower them to the ground after I grab this climb heist. So that's the first chunk of the rock rescue drill. That also gives you some ideas of how useful the MMO is, and hopefully an idea of how you could pass a knot and how you can transfer loads from one belay device to the next. Let's see. People ask some questions. Let's see what people got. You trust the loop as a backup? There's core shot in it. Oh yeah. So Kevin, I addressed your question. Don't trust that. I would backup there's core shot. It's not. Maybe by if it's loaded at another climb heist on an MMO. Yep. Nice. Oh, that's it was a test. Yeah, exactly. Do you have great question, Joe. Do you have to use a pair / HMS or can you use a non-locker? I assume you're talking about for the Klein heist carabiner. You can use a non-locker because it's not what's holding the person's weight up. It's just temporarily holding their weight, and you are definitively backing it up on another system. Cool. Not through. Okay, cool. Cool. All right, let's look at our oh man, I'm like so tired. Let's look at our PDF again and talk about what we've or look at what we've talked about and see what's next. Share screen. Okay. So next, hopefully you guys can see this. Lower uninjured climber to the ground with a knot pass. So this whole drill, the way I'm doing it right now is not exactly the way you're going to do it on your exam if you're doing this for an exam, because you're going to have a whole nother rope attached through that ATC. The only nuance there is you just have to put them on a baseline as well. And uh, this note is important. So the uninjured climber cannot unweight the rope during the knot pass. They can unweight the rope beforehand. So essentially, when you're initially doing it, you only have to use the client heist on one client, and then the other one can just unweight, stand up, and then re-weight the baseline that you tied while you're undoing the thing. And I'll send you guys a resource to literally like the drill to a T, how you should do it. But hopefully this is like, again, an intermediate between professional and recreation usage of all of these skills. So remove the injured client's rope from the plate. We did that. So we didn't do this yet. Hauling. Let's talk about hauling. Let's talk about hauling using let's talk about hauling using the plate, I think. Or let's just use a gree because again, I want to meld it to be somewhat recreational as well. I don't want it just the rock rescue drill. I want it based off of that. So let's use a gree, and hopefully this will show you the massive benefits of using a gree in your recreational climbing and the massive drawbacks it has when you have to do this exam not having it. So let's stop share. Okay. So let's talk hauling now. People spit some ideas of like why you would want to haul someone. Why might you want to haul someone up to you at the top? Just post in the chat. What are some thoughts or some areas? Like I've got a couple area ideas. Yeah, let's see what people have. Getting past the crux, that's a great, yeah, fell off a roof and it's overhung. That's a great one too. Totally. Better rescue spot. Yeah, if they're in a comfier spot, then they can just hang out. Passing the knot through the mud. Oh, yeah. So those are all great options. Another is just inaccessibility of the base. So if it's like a sea cliff or something like that, I know, I think it's Maine has some cool sea cliffs you can climb at. And you're not going down to the sea to get rescued. You're going to want to go back up to where you started. So sort of those lower end venues. I mentioned one here in Moab where you lower into the canyon and you climb out. But yeah, those are all great reasons. So here we have my gree. I'm belaying my person up. The first thing, if you've done an SPI, you certainly know this. The first thing to do, if it's just a crux thing, if they're just trying to get past a difficult section. Okay, I'm gonna fully undo this just for your guys' clarity of being able to see less green rope. If it's just a crux thing, so I'm just trying to get through a hard part, a great option is called the vector pull. Again, this is covered a lot in SPI curriculum, but essentially it's just you grab the load strand, you grab their strand, and instead of pulling them up like this, you pull it out like this or out away from the rock like so. It often helps if I were like at a hanging stance here, I could use my legs against the wall and push with my legs and pull that rope out. And it's essentially using your brain more than your muscles is what you're doing. But that's called the vector pull. There are tons of videos on that, and you can practice it very easily by literally just grab a piece of cord and pull like this, and you can feel how much power you get from that. So vector pull is great. Another one I learned just recently, which is pretty sick. Let's see if I can recreate it. This I learned on my ice instructor course recently. Yeah. Okay, so if they're just trying to get through the crux, you can clip the load strand of their belay device. And then what you do, need more quick draws. I'll just make one. This one's cool. You clip above that as well. So it's like this, which looks weird. And if you haven't seen it before, you're like, I don't know how this is working. And then you clip that to you. And then essentially what you do is you just sit into it, and it makes a very quick and simple sort of, I think it's a 3-to-1. Essentially, I'm weighting down like this. I'm pulling a bight of rope. Maybe it's a 2-to-1. I'm pulling this bight of rope down, which is pulling them up. The disadvantage is that does not capture the progress. You would have to use them to capture the progress. So again, maybe it's a crux. Maybe they're climbing through the crux. I just sit down really hard. They go up about 2 feet to a good hold. They grab that. Or if in ice climbing, this is very much a thing. If you let go of your tool and you fall and your tool is out of reach, it's really hard to grab it. Doing this, you sit into it. They get a little boost. They grab onto their tool. You undo this. You take out the slack, and they're off to the races again. So that's another cool one I recently was taught. And then let's go into more technical solutions. So let's say it's not just a crux. Maybe they're, I like the one scenario they fell off a roof and it's overhung. They're just not able to touch the air. Your first step is a 3-to-1. This is often talked about in SPIs as well. So what you can do is just tie any sort of prusik or auto block or whatever. Tie some kind of hitch and tie a lot of it. That way it's grippy. Can you see that? You cannot see that. You see it now? Just go like this. Okay, so I have a hitch on the climber side. I then take the tail and I clip it in here. I then can undo this knot. And I'm just going to crank that up. And that's going to pull my climber up. Grigori is going to capture the progress. Yeah, that's pretty much it. To add mechanical advantage to this, I'm gonna have to remember this. I often do the backside of the clove method. So in your exam, you'll have to create either a 5-to-1 or 6-to-1 with this. So you have your prusik down here. You need to figure out how to add mechanical advantage. I'm gonna try and remember it. So there's 2 ways. My favorite is the way where you add this, take it away, you add a clove. I'll talk about it in a second, don't worry. And you reclip that like so. So hopefully there's enough green rope that you guys can see. This, like this. Let's see if you guys can see that. You can barely see it. So this is my clove, my tie-in point right here. My tie-in point goes through this friction hitch. So this friction hitch was what I originally tied my 3-to-1 on. So it was like this. I then, instead of that, I'm going to grab my tie-in point, my rope. I clove a carabiner to it. I replace that. And now I have 1, 2, that's 2. Who knows what this is? Let me do the math. You guys can probably beat me though. 1, 1, 2. That's 2, 2. That's 4. This is a 5-to-1. Yeah. Yeah, this is a 5-to-1. So if you're assigned a 5-to-1, nice. You almost nailed it. yeah, if you're assigned a 5-to-1, this is what that could look like. Another way to add clarity if the rope confuses you is you can use another material instead of your tie-in point. This might make more sense for our little video here too. I'm gonna undo my tie-in point so it's clear, and then let's add a sling. So I'll just grab a triple length. I'll grab a double length actually. But it's not too long. So I have my 3-to-1 here, and I'm trying to transition this to a 5-to-1. That's in a weird way. 5-to-1, 2-to-1 inside of 3-to-1, 6-to-1 is 2-to-1 on top of it. That's exactly it. Yeah. So yeah, to add it with a little more clarity, you can add a sling into the mix. So I just fix the sling on a carabiner here. I then feed this through. And this is where I can add on a clove hitch my other carabiner. I'm gonna clip it in because it's a bite. And then here. And then undo that. Okay. Now, hopefully on the video, this makes it a little bit clearer. This is the same thing, except instead of my rope, it is now this double length sling. So essentially I pull like so. It captures the progress with the gree here. I then reset by pushing this down. The reason I would use this as a go-to as opposed to a 6-to-1 in a real life scenario is you only have to reset one thing as opposed to two things. A 6-to-1, you have to reset two things, and I'll show that in a second. A 5-to-1, you only reset one thing, and the reason is this sling is a fixed length. I don't have to adjust that as I go. Whereas a 6-to-1, I wish you could see a little bit better. Hopefully you guys can see this. This 5-to-1, you only have to reset this. A 6-to-1, you have to reset two things. So that's a huge benefit in my mind of a 5-to-1 on your exam. Cross your fingers for a 5-to-1 because it's going to be a lot faster, so long as you got it down. Let's do a 3-to-1 to a 6-to-1 now, which is the one I'll really have to remember because I did that exam a while ago now. Let's see. I also want to reset this because I tied it poorly. So it's embarrassing, you know. Okay, adding my Kleinheist. Often a Kleinheist is nice for your exam because it takes a little less time to tie than a Prusik, and it binds a little bit more than an auto block. Okay, back to my 3-to-1. So let's transition to have this be a 6-to-1. I'm going to be closed in again. We'll see if I can remember the steps for this. So 3-to-1, 6-to-1. Take this. Yes. Okay, so gosh, I hate this one. Get rid of the 5-to-1. So 3-to-1 here. I'm going to add my backside. Boy, now I'm tripping myself out. This is the 5-to-1, clove here. No, that's the 6-to-1. Okay. We got it. Okay, so here's my 3-to-1. Like you described, it's a 2-to-1 on a 3-to-1. So here's my 3-to-1. Essentially, I usually use a clove hitch instead of another Prusik. You can use another Prusik here. Both work. It just depends what kind of material you have. So I'm going to clip this here. This is on the backside of my 3-to-1. So again, if I pull here, that's just still a 3-to-1, right? Just still pulling a 3-to-1. What makes it a 6-to-1 is I add a 2-to-1 on top of it. And I'm going to do that by using, again, my tie-in point here. So I'll clip that in. And now when I pull it, it looks nice and confusing. Now when I pull it, this is a 2-to-1 right here. And then this is my 3-to-1. Okay. Again, the disadvantage here is when I need to reset this, I'm going to let the gree capture the progress, which it's not doing because it's not enough weight. And then I reset this prusik or this climb heist down here, as well as this clove hitch. There is the benefit of having a friction hitch here. Is it's a bit easier to reset than like, you know, adjusting this and then doing it again. Yeah, but in general, I just like the 5-to-1 better. So my fingers are crossed for you guys that you get a 5-to-1 on your exam. Like that. You will have to reset this one a little bit less than this one. This one resets every time. This one resets a little bit less. Like at this point, I'd probably just reset the big one and then do it again. But again, the reason you're resetting it is because this strand is attached to what you're grabbing on your 3-to-1. Hopefully that makes some sort of semblance of sense. I would say in your recreation, if you're using a 6-to-1, man, shit's probably gone wrong. So I really hope you guys don't have to use a 6-to-1 or a 5-to-1 in your own recreation. Yeah, probably at a C cliff or something, or if someone's like really heavy. I don't know. Often, what I find is a 3-to-1 works quite well. Oh, we got a diagram. That's exactly it. Yeah. So the diagram Kevin sent is pretty lit. So 2. Oh, it all says 2. Never mind. The fixed sling on the left is what I was using as my backside of my clove hitch or another sling. Cool. Yeah, 5-to-1. Wow, and everyone does the math on these things so much differently. Like oh no, I add like this as well. Yeah, so you start with your load is 1, then the backside of that is 1, and you add it to get 2. If you're not good with mechanical advantage and the numbers of all that kind of stuff, just rote memory it. Just do it a bunch of times until you figure it out. Okay, let's go back to our PDF and see what's left. So we did that. We hauled rappel to the injured client, ascend back to the original anchor. I'm gonna not do this because it's pretty easy to do. And I would rather talk about counterbalance rappel than talk about this realistically. If anyone's like crazy opposed to that, just chime in that you want to hear the rappel to ascent. And maybe I'll finish with it, but I'm going to skip it for right now. And we're going to talk about counterbalance rappels to the injured client and continue to a lower anchor. I find this to be a skill that actually could be quite useful if you climb multi-pitch a lot. I think people underestimate how much this can do. Like if you can transition through anchors with an injured person, like you can really do a lot for a rescue, as opposed to if you cannot do that, you're sort of trapped. So that's why I would lean towards talking about this over rappel to ascent. So counterbalance, yeah, it has some specifics of like the exam stuff. We won't talk about it too much. This thing we'll mention because that gets people in the exam actually. Attach. Yeah, cool. Let's do that. Hopefully I'm not losing totally everyone, or hopefully at least you feel comfortable rewatching this and figuring it out. I mean, maybe it is good if I'm losing everyone. Then I'm talking about stuff that people can learn. Who knows? Let's do what kind of setup should we do? Let's do a Grigori again because I feel like there is enough material out there for the exam specific kind of stuff. But a Grigori is more recreational, and I like a Grigori. And I have only done it with ATC, so this will be fun. The same situation. I'm attached with the flow. I'm belaying my climber up. They are the strand. And what's the scenario here? Let's say, what am I going to have to do? I'm going to have to counterbalance repel with them, to them, and then keep repelling. So maybe they break their leg or something a little bit more serious. And you want to like get down to them and just GTFO. You want to get to the ground and not even care about leaving gear or that kind of stuff. You just want to get out. So we'll raise it up so we can see the anchor a bit more. Okay, so first I'm going to tie a catastrophe knot behind my device. That way I can go hands-free with anything. No, I don't even need to do that. I'm just going to go to baseline, actually. So I take that back. So I'm going to go to baseline. So again, steps to go to baseline. You add your definitive system first. So I'm going to add my munter, mule, overhand. Boom, boom, boom. Please go practice munter mule overhand. It is like key for any sort of rescue. If you're a climber, you should know it. I feel like munters are like out of date because people don't really use them, but man, they are essential if anything goes wrong and you like want to fix it. So I have my definitive system behind it. I'm now going to try and get my device out. Yeah. Trying to think of if I actually have to do this. We'll do it because this is the steps that you go through. Go like this. Add my climb heist. You want it nice and clean so that it actually engages like that. Again, you can add this knot that can save you some time if you totally botch something. I'm gonna keep this up high. I'm gonna grab a carabiner. I'll demo it with a non-locker since someone asked that. Again, this climb heist doesn't have to be a locker. I can just add a non-locker and I can add it to the system that I'm going to. So I add my munter, I add my mule, and then I pull that through. This is on a non-locker, real scary. I'm gonna feed this down. I'm then going to release this gree so that there's enough slack that I can undo it. Now what I have are two stacked MMOs. One is on a cord on a non-locker, and one is my definitive system behind the whole thing, and that's the rope. So what I'm going to do is release my cord, lower that out so I can get my cord back. And you can see that because it's on the system I'm going to, it's very easy to just undo it. You're never going to get your carabiner stuck. You can then undo your climb heist and continue on. So our goal is to counterbalance repel. So how are we going to do that? We need something to leave first. I could have definitely kept my climb heist on, but whatever. So we need something to leave. I'm going to leave this carabiner. And you could not leave something, but it would involve you having to feed the whole rope through these chains right now, which I don't feel like doing. So I'm gonna attach this locking carabiner to both of these chains, and I'm gonna commit to this is what I'm gonna leave. I'll clip my backside of my baseline to it. And then I'm going to attach myself to this strand. So for clarity, I'll move myself again, just out of the system. So again, here we have baseline, backside is going up to this. Now I'm going to attach myself using something. Personal anchor. I'm going to attach myself. So I would be cloved in. I think it's kind of distracting to be cloved in right now. So I'm just going to add my personal anchor. You can choose whatever one you want in your exam. It does not matter. I often go with offset basket. You'll want to definitely go to baseline in your exam here. One, because you've already been doing a whole bunch of stuff, but two, because you need your ATC to set up on rappel. So I guess you've already ascended, so that's already pretty obvious. So I attach this to my personal anchor. I set up on I add my third hand, which is sitting over here. I'll reclip myself, even though it's slightly unclear. It is kind of essential for these next steps because people do mess this up. Okay, I'm adding my rappel device on a single strand on the backside of my climber. Copy. Okay. Cool. Now I'm gonna do another another load transfer. This time I'm load transferring to myself. So what do we do with any load transfer? Dun, dun, dun. On ice. That's right, with the cord. So yet again, I'm tying another one of these. Go around. Save time on your exam. You can keep this one on there. I removed it and then thought about it right after. So that can tie your oh shit knot. Then go like this. For this one, I'm going to use a locker, and I'll explain why in a second. And I'm gonna not stack it on that same one because I'm not transferring to that one. Go like this. It doesn't need to be a locker, but it makes this next transition decent. So MMO on the cord, I then push it down, same steps as before. But the difference is my definitive system in this setup, right? Normally we have this, which helps us move along to our next system. We have this, which is our old system. And then like previously we've had another baseline as our definitive system. In this case, our definitive system is me on rappel. So we're going to want to double check this and make sure it's solid. Otherwise, we're just hanging our person on a friction hitch. So pull up, test that thing out, pull that up, tie a knot, right? Your knot can't go through your ATC. Tie a knot. Now I know my definitive system works. It might just like pull this guy up a little bit, which in this case it did accidentally. I know my definitive system works. I can then release this. So that's kind of inobvious right now because my definitive system's working too much. But I'm releasing this MMO so that it's on the Klein heist. I undo this, get rid of this. I have a bunch of slack now, right? because I undid that MMO that used to be here. Definitely, 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 you're gonna have to take out that slack. So take this out, take the time, take that out, bring your third hand up. It's another spot where you can just double check everything. This is also a cool spot too, because my injured climber is hanging on this strand. And I am the definitive system on the back side of that. This is the time where I can sit into this and pull up this Klein heist. I don't even need to release this guy, the cord, because I can just sit into it. My climber might go up a little bit. That's okay. I'm sitting into this. I am now realizing, like, okay, I am the counter ballast for my climber. This is where you really want to focus on an exam, but especially if you're doing this in real life, right? At this point, I've taken their weight. This Klein heist is pretty much undone. I am counterbalanced repelling through this carabiner with them. I can take this off and get rid of it. Or what I can do, which you have to do in your exam, is clip this to you. And you can use like the extension here if you want. But clip it to you because that protects you from a damaged rope below you. I'll explain that a little bit better. So I've clipped myself to this strand of the rope, right? If I start repelling and there's a damaged section of rope below this, what's going to happen if that fails, this is going to pull up, this is going to engage, and I'm not going to totally die. My climber, for sure, they're not going to do well because the rope just exploded, but at least two people aren't like careening to the ground. All right, so that's the benefit of adding this, and it is a point of failure for a lot of people in their exams. So make sure you just clip to that and then bring it down as you go. Then your last step is to undo your clove. If you undo this first, then you're susceptible to that rope damage. If you clip yourself to this and then unclip this, then you're not susceptible. So I now unclip that. I go like that. I can take my anchor with me. This whole aspect is much more difficult when it's a real person on the other end because they're like pulling you up into this carabiner, right? Their weight is actually on this strand, so you're fighting their weight while trying to like wait and unhook the anchor while you're doing it. So this is certainly well worth practice, and we'll talk about how to practice to wrap up this whole thing. Okay, now I'm rappelling down. Doom, 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 doom. I get to my climber, and they're at, let's say this is the end of my rope. This is the climber. To continue on and go to the anchor, it's as simple as a pickoff in an SPI. I essentially just put this wherever I want, and I continue rappelling, and my climb heist brings them down with me until I get to my next anchor. Hopefully that makes sense. Again, it's similar to a pickoff like you would learn in SPI. This thing is bringing your climber down. Okay. We're going to talk about transitioning to the next anchor in a second. In the meantime, I need to reset a couple things. Maybe add into the chat any questions you have. I know I am not the only person that is a guide here. It seems like there are some pretty knowledgeable people in the chat. Ask some questions. Let's see if we can get people answering them. Sometimes people are scared to ask questions. Don't be scared. Now is the time to learn all these things. The free clinic. Let's talk about what's learned. Yeah, and in the meantime, I'm gonna reset this so that this will be our hypothetical next anchor. Done. Intermission. On the ceiling. Oh, no questions. Nothing. Seems like you'd be lowering them a bit as you want to be cognizant not to let any of your weight off, or else you would certainly lower them while you rappel down to them. And that's something that takes a decent amount of practice for sure. You could for sure, like I guess to clarify on that question too, Kevin, when you're rappelling to them, you are minding that climb heist as you go. And then when you get to them, that's when you engage that climb heist. If you engage the climb heist and continue to rappel, then they would go down. The climb heist is only there initially to protect you against damage being on their strand. And then the climb heist is there once you get to them to bring them down with you. Hopefully that answers it. Okay. We are here. Like this. Okay, I'm essentially just resetting as if this anchor was up higher, and I am just coming from it right now. Oh boy. Okay, this is like a heavy weight. Flipped a bunch of chacos together so that we have a little bit of weight. And this will be this red carabiner will be my climber. So pick off, you're actually lowering. Oh, you're up. Totally. Yeah, dragging them with you. Yeah, seems like I move a bit before you get to them. Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly it, Kevin. Kevin, remind me where you work. And where your goals are for this. I could scroll through, or you could just copy and paste it again. Sound like you're prepping for exam, not a guy, just reference. Nice. Man, you sound dialed. I'd love to be your climbing partner. Okay, so we are set up. Oh, and where is that chord that I just said? Oh, here it is. And so my climb heist is above them. I'm gonna just tie it. So hopefully this is clear as mud. Go like that. And go like this. So does this make sense? Oh, you can't even see it. Okay. So as I'm rappelling down, as I'm rappelling down, before I get to them, I don't engage this climb heist. I then get to them, I engage this above them, and I continue rappelling, and they come down with me. I get to the next anchor. Here I am. How am I going to transfer our load onto this anchor and then off of this anchor if they're incapacitated? Let's say this escalated real quick. It started as a leg injury. Maybe they're in and out of consciousness. They're essentially not reliable. You can't rely on them to pick up their own weight. Maybe this is a hanging stance. Those are some thoughts before you go into this, is like, what sort of situation is it? If they can unweight, then you can just clip them to the anchor. You clip to the anchor, you undo your whole system, redo a whole system, clip them to you, and rappel together. If they're in and out of consciousness, if they're incapacitated in any way, you'll likely want to do some sort of releasable load transfer, which what we've learned, you need to cook dinner. Oh, nice. Oh, goody, you're still living there. Hey. So yeah, load releasable system, which we've talked about, is an MMO. We're gonna make another MMO. In this this time, what we're gonna do is I'm already tied in here from earlier. I'm just gonna use the back side of this to create this MMO. So what I'll do is I'll clip a carabiner here. I'll clip my figure 8 to it. I'll then lock that. I then can, let's say, I want this a little higher so y'all can see it. Then I'm going to add a carabiner to their belay loop. And this is where I tie my MMO this time. So I go like this. I am confusing myself because it's backwards. There we go. When I do this in the real world, I want this really, really tight. So I want this triangle that I'm creating. Ignore this. See this little pyramid I'm creating right here? I want that nice and small, because you're going to lose progress from rope stretch. So as I'm going to this anchor, this is like the first thing I'm doing. I might create this while I'm still like up here. Then I'll add my mule. And then my overhand. And essentially this one's like a little bit backwards than the ones we were tying before, right? It's coming off of this person and it's going up. Now, what have I done? I've tied us together through this carabiner onto this anchor. I've essentially attached us using 2 personal anchors. It's just the rope that's in between us. Now I can undo everything besides, what I just created. So I undo this. I take my Kleinheist off, or I guess in this case, I transitioned it to a Prusik. There we go. Again, if you're on the exam, just put that in your sun hoodie. They'll grab it later. I continue to undo by undoing my rappel setup. Like so. And don't reinvent the wheel. Don't fully undo it. Just undo it and let it dangle. And then I'm going to fully untie them. I'll untie them from the rope. I then, oh, this is so unfortunate because I fed the end. So now I have 70 meters on this side. That's okay. This is what we'll do. Then I pull my rope. Boom, 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 boom. And again, we're attached just through here like so with this muncher mule overhand. Goes from me, from my tying point, up to this carabiner, back down to an MMO. And that's basically it. Rope comes down. I then am going to feed it through. This part I'll fudge a little bit. But I don't want to pull a full 70 over these electrical wires. Cables. Okay. I then am just trying to get down. So I'm just rappelling with this person at this point. I find middle. I tie a knot. I find middle here. This is the nice, easy part. And once you get here in your exam, you're like in the clear. You rig like you would normally. And you make sure this is super, super high up. because you'll totally sandbag yourself if it's not. I then attach my third hand, clip that in, and then you just clip your injured climber to your tether right here. So I just clip them to this. I clip the belay loop in. I lock that. I double check everything, right? I'm loading this. They're locked and loaded. And then what I do, hopefully you guys can see this. This is, let me untangle something. Okay, this is my rappel. This is them clipped into me. Right? I then undo this muncher mule overhand. Boom. And when I'm undoing this, I'm going to slowly release them onto me. Right? So I slowly release this, and this part of my personal tether gets tight. This part of my personal tether gets tight. They're now on me, and I have that third hand in. I can undo that. This is the super cool part. You can then untie this. Right? I untie my knot. I pull that through my original anchor. I tie a knot. Throw that down. I take this, and now I'm just set up on a normal rappel with my injured climber attached to me as well. Once I get to the next one, I rinse and repeat. So I would re-tie in, or maybe they would tie in, and I would add the muncher to me, or you just repeat. So I would tie in again. I would get to my anchor. I'd feed it through, add a munter mule overhand to them so that it's a releasable load transfer. I would set this whole thing up, flip them to me, release the load, and do it again. You can essentially do this. You could still do it tied in for sure. I couldn't because it was. Oh, I could have. Yeah, I could have just taken the. Yeah, you could totally still stay tied into that. And it would save you time if you're doing it for an exam or anything. You could stay tied in. You just unclip your anchor, unclip it from the rope, and then it's even easier to rinse and repeat. Yeah, I'm gonna undo this, and then we'll talk about like next steps for you guys for how to practice this kind of thing. And yeah, and whatnot. I think you got like 2 minutes left. Boy, just in time. So let's share screen again and go one more time back to this. We'll talk specifically about this in an exam scenario first, and then we'll talk about it in a recreational scenario second. It lays out all the rules. If you're doing this for an exam, it lays out all the equipment you can use, it lays out all the rules. There is a potential 2 different order situation, but it talks about that. Right here in the rules, talks about it. You have 50 minutes. All of these things are within the exam. We talked about everything except rappelling and ascending, which is decently easy. It's covered in most SPIs, so that's why I breezed over it a little bit. And yeah, they even make this cool little flow chart, which is kind of fun. The time stops. Yeah, time stops when your rope hits the ground. So you are frantically pulling at the end to try and beat 50 minutes. That's that for the exam, and that exam is for the advanced rock guide course. It's essentially after you do your rock guide course, that would be the second step in the rock track. There is a partial exam component which includes this. When we talk about this in a recreational setting, a lot of these skills can be very useful. I've climbed a lot and guided a lot in El Potrero Chico in Mexico, and it's like big sport climbs everywhere. There are bolted anchors everywhere, and the base is essentially where you would get if you needed to get to an ambulance or anything. And you have it feels like you have a lot of security there, but you're also in Mexico. There's not going to be a rescue waiting for you. So any sort of skills like this can be hugely beneficial in any large multi-pitch scenarios. Even if you're up 2 pitches, you don't have to be that high to get in a lot of trouble. So practicing this stuff is key. When you are practicing this, do not practice it in a life-threatening situation, right? Don't practice it up on the cliff. I trained and practiced this for a very long time before I had that partial exam component of my advanced. And every time I practiced, even if it was on a cliff, there was an entirely separate colored rope. There was that people were clipped to, unrelated to anything that I touched or my partners touched, right? That rope is like the designated backup rope, and you just don't touch it. And a lot of this stuff can be practiced on the ground. I mean, you just saw an hour and a half of me practicing this stuff on the ground and learning from people while I'm doing it. You can always be learning. Thank you, Kevin. A lot of chiming in from you, and it was great. But yeah, practice on the ground. It doesn't have to be like way up in the air for you and your friends to like grab a couple beers and practice like I'm literally hanging this off of like electrical cables, which is why I did not weight it. But you don't need a lot to practice it. You need your rope, you need your gear that you already have, and a buddy, if that, right? I just did it by myself. You don't even need that. So practice those things. Practice your muncher mule overhands. Those are essential in any sort of rescue scenario. And make it fun. Like I said, do it with a couple buddies that you go climbing with a lot. And yeah, it doesn't have to be like a total time suck and no fun, right? If you gain these skills, then you're going to be a better climbing partner for each other. And if anything does happen, you'll actually have like means to figure it out. Other than that, thank you guys for so many people coming. That's pretty rad. And yeah, this thing will be posted on YouTube as soon as I get to it. So feel free to watch it a bunch. Oh, and let me send one more thing into the. I'll post this. I'll just send it in an email afterwards, actually. But there's some really good videos that the AMGA does about this drill that you can dive into more. And yeah, this one guy, Silas Rossi, really has a great video of this drill that's very specific to it being a drill. But he talks about all of these different things, and it's real fun to watch. He's a really great guide. Yeah, and if you have any questions, reach out. You have my email. Everyone has my email. Please send me an email. This is like one of my favorite topics to talk about. So yeah, feel free to shoot me an email or whatever. We'll talk about it. Cool. Take care, y'all, and see you next month. If anyone has any ideas for a meeting next month, hit me up. I'm looking for ideas.